Okay, for this session, I am going to try and start adding a schema validation to the Songbook gem. But first, let's just check if our project is still up to date. Mhm. All right, that is in Songbook. Let's just do some cleanup. Okay, we're in master. I think this is up to date. All right, not up to date. Good that I checked. Okay. Um, let's do this properly and let's go to our let's go to our project in GitHub and create an issue. Let's say I want to validate the song file. What's my goal? I want to validate the song file. I'm the YAML song file so that it's easier for me to debug the file if it's not valid. Implementation, let's try, we're going to try this gem JSON schema to validate the song file. Assign myself, let's start. Okay, and this is the first issue on Songbook. We're also going to time this so that I can take a break. We'll just continue it later. Oops, there. Okay, forgot the term. One tomato session. Haha. Okay, so now we're going to create a branch, validate song file. There. And we can move this out for now and think about how we're planning to do this. At the moment, our CLI, let's see, where is that? Executable. It has two options. It either accepts a file or it can generate multiple song files. Now, I am leaning on just removing the generate song files feature because it's not something I use very often. Most of the time when I use this gem, I only generate a single file. And if I wanted to generate multiple songs, I can just create a script and run them all. I think that's what I did before. I actually forgot that this gem has a multiple song files feature. So if I just generate a single file, it might be more maintainable because I only have to consider generating one file at a time. So yeah, I want to keep it as simple as possible. So maybe let's try that. We are going to remove a feature. But first, before we do that, we update our bundle. It's been a while since we've done this. We run overcommit. Overcommit install. All right. Um, let's try. Okay, let's try running our spec. Okay, good that we still have a stub. Bin stub for our spec. Now we try and delete this part. Let's write a note to not that one. Going to edit. Let's use checklist. This is just to keep track of what we want to do. We want to remove later. This generate song files later. Let's try and organize this a bit. This falls under preparation. And here validation part. Just trying to organize it early on. Okay, can move that out. Now let's try and make this fail by removing this part. Okay. Sorry. Okay, let's see if this is actually going to fail. I have a feeling it won't, because it didn't, because we're not testing the executable. However, which means that we can just delete this generate song files, and this one. And our spec should still pass. Okay, so that's nice. What happens if we commit? Yes, Robocop. Okay. Good to see that Robocop didn't complain. Remove generate song files. Remove option to generate multiple files we want to simplify executable. Okay, something that we want to improve later here is we want to check if the input path we want to validate the input path. It should be a file. Output path can be, I think it can be a directory, if I remember correctly. No, it has to be a file as well, although it's possible that that file does not exist yet, I think. Yeah. So maybe it's out of scope for this. Let's call it stretch goals, or maybe it's likely that this will be added to a future issue. What we want is to check if input path is an existing file. Okay, now that we're back here, we can let's go over what we want to do. So generate song file. It, I believe, just as a quick test, we can do executable songbook. Then if we have a file like those in our fixtures, and we can just save it in a temporary directory. It's a directory. Okay. What if we leave it out? I think that works. So the way it works right now is that we can't specify the output directory. And when the I guess here, select output path. Yeah. If the path exists, cannot find. This is incorrect. This okay. But that's the input path. Okay. Okay. If it's a file. Okay. If there's an output path, put it there. Otherwise, put it here. But we can improve the output path so that it's a directory with the same base name as the input path. So that's something we can improve for later. Okay. So sorry for clearing my throat. Not used to. Maybe next time I should have a glass of water when I do this. Okay. Let's see. I was able to generate a file. Interestingly, it's not. Where did it save it? It's not in the. Is it in the fixtures? Okay. It generated it in the fixtures here. Yep. Interestingly, it didn't affect our. Okay. So much to do. Yeah. When I created this project before, it was a kind of a hackathon. I mean, it was a spike that became more or less permanent. Okay, back to our goal. We want to be able to validate song file. I'm thinking of using this gem JSON schema. The idea is that after we load the YAML file, we just validate it like this, or we specify the schema, we validate it, and do we want to raise an error? It might be better to just display an error. Return an array of error messages. That's nice. There's also the issue of if the file right now, if the file doesn't load properly, it causes the executable to fail. So it would be nice to be able to handle the loading file issue more gracefully. Okay, and let's take note of that also. A lot of the goals are probably out of the scope of what we want to do. We're just using this as a temporary place to take note of to-dos that we want to do later. handle YAML loading errors more gracefully. Alright, now the question that came to my mind is, where do we want to validate? Because the current process of this class is it ultimately it gets the song text and writes it on the output path. The song text is taken from our song object, which gets its data from song data, which is the YAML loaded file from the input path. So it's like you could put the validation in this class, you can put it in render song, you can put it in song itself. So where is it who should be responsible for calling the validation? In the context of this gem, there's not much use for a song if it's not valid. So it doesn't make sense to keep an invalid song stored while this program runs. Also, the song is currently set up getting the data immediately from song data. So much of there's already an assumption here that these are properly set up. At least that these main components of the YAML file are already there. But if they're not, this will still work, but song will then be invalid. For example, a song makes some assumptions about the structure of the value that was passed. Okay, we could validate each section of song data within song. That's also possible. You would have one schema for details, one schema for chords, and one schema for lyrics, and then you would check each one in song. Yeah, that seems advantage of that is that as the model of the song for the song from someone who's worked on Rails applications, seems like this is the most natural place to validate. You would want to validate, for example, the idea is that you want to validate the schema of this is just with the code of details given this detail schema. Something like that, and other validations for chords and lyrics. If we go back to generate song file, YAML load does the parsing. If there's a parsing error, this is the one that explodes. But if there's no parsing error, if it's valid YAML, then we can this would work regardless of whether there are these values exist. So it's actually it might be a good idea for a song to do the validation. And like I said earlier, it's a natural way of it's a conventional way of doing it. similar to how we do it with Rails. Uh, Now, if we, where do we do the validation then? If that's the case, what happened is that we could do it here, but okay. A good question is, where do we want to display the errors? We want to display the errors on the console. We know that we have to rescue, later on we want to rescue stuff, YAML loading issues here, display it directly. So it would be nice if the error messages are done on a single layer. Another way is okay, this song text, interestingly, we are memoizing it at the moment, but we don't have to. So if we remove this part, okay, we could, yeah, I'm thinking of doing the validation within render song. So it's, again, this is kind of similar to how, okay, we could, okay, we could have a service, a render song service, and then we check if it's valid. If it's valid, then we call render song and write the result. If not, then we display the errors yeah, I can't remember, something like that. We put them out. So that feels clean. This is again, this is similar to how we do in Rails, and the consequence of this is that our render song, okay, we can, okay, we would have a valid, and this valid would validate what? It would validate the song. So maybe it can pass, it can delegate validation to song, because by itself it doesn't know how to validate the song. So it would have to delegate valid and errors to song. Now, okay, so this again is similar to how we do in Rails. Validations occur here. You would have it might make sense to have an active, because this is getting to look more and more Railsy. It may make sense to add active model validations to song. so that we can store the errors and display them later. Okay, so that's a lot of change before we get to the exciting part of actually using the schema to validate. Okay, like at least in here we can validate each one of them. For example, we want a title to be a string. We want to, although title is let's see, it's taken from the input path, so we can include the validation for title as well. The not exciting part here is having to test. Right now we're not testing the executable. That's kind of okay because most of the logic is in the classes. That's fine for me. But it would be nice to validate to test at this part and then validate. Do we want to validate render song? If it just delegates the validation to song, maybe we can skip that part. What if we don't? What if we just call song validation here? Let's see. Generate song file knows about the song. It creates a song, so we can make the assumption that rendering song is only useful if the song is valid. Render song doesn't need to know. It just needs to have a valid song. So I think that's okay as well. So instead of doing this, we can just check immediately if song is valid, then there's no need to render the song. If the song is valid, we can render the song, but otherwise we just display the errors of the song. At least that's one less thing we have to do. And I think that's okay because this generate song file already creates the song. The song that it creates can be valid or invalid, and when it calls it, it renders the song, renders the errors. Okay. Sometimes what I like to do is okay, at this moment we have a single file that we've changed. There are some API that we kind of got started with. Let's undo the changes first before we end the session. Let's refactor by removing some text because we're going to add the error handling here later on. So let me try and run the spec. Okay, process. Let's commit. Let's see if Robocop complains. Do I actually have Robocop running? I don't know. Inline rendering of song. No need to memorize song text. Okay, we are doing a Robocop. Now, if we pop the changes that we did earlier, there's a conflict. Where's our... Okay, just copy this whole thing and you're good. So now we should expect some errors from generate song file because song doesn't have a valid method yet. It doesn't have errors. We're going to add that. And I can't remember if this is actually valid. Maybe we can see our active record API. Okay, so I'm going to pause for now, and I'm going to maybe if I have time, I'm going to continue this later.